Hey guys, this is Donny Football from 93.7 The Fan, and this is Dingo Talk.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is Dingo Talk. My guest this week, Don Chedrick from The Fan. He's also a big football guy. And later on in the episode, we're going to talk about he's a wing expert. So we're going to learn some things about chicken wings, I'm hoping. Don, thank you and for those of you that know him as Donny Football, that's who this is, Donny Football. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Greensburg-Salem, 2014. How do you make your way down to Greene County, West Virginia, or Pennsylvania?
So I didn't know about Waynesburg until my senior year, which I guess is kind of late because at least the way that my parents treated the college search, it was pretty serious, I would say. I have a sister who's 6 years older than me, so they sort of already knew the process, and they wanted to get me looking pretty early on. So I looked at a lot of schools my sophomore year, pretty heavily my junior year. And I played football in high school. I thought, maybe I'll play in college, depending on where I go. I didn't want to make that the main focus, though, because, I had seen friends of mine who had played football, and they kind of made the mistake of picking a school for the sport instead of the school itself. And then I had a teacher in high school, my journalism teacher. He suggested Waynesburg to me, and he said, Lanny Frateri's down there, the old Pirates broadcaster. And I knew a couple of guys from Greensburg who had gone to Waynesburg, and I got in contact with them. They were a few years older than me. I scheduled an overnight stay. I did show interest in playing football there, so I kind of got the tour through that too. But, I got to meet with Lanny after talking to him on the phone, kind of go through the entire department. The entire fourth floor of one building is all dedicated to the comm department there. And after that tour, I was pretty much in. So that's really all it took. I waited a little bit to commit to go there, but after I went on that tour, I was pretty positive that's where I was going to end up. I gave it a little bit more time, weighed my pros and cons, but I felt like that was going to be the right place for me.
Now, communications was always the goal. That was what you wanted to do. This is kind of the field you wanted to get into.
Yeah, honestly, I got to say I was lucky that it popped in my brain pretty early in high school that I wanted to do something related to the sports media field, you could say. I was actually more interested in the writing side. I was more interested in journalism early on, and how I kind of fell into the, I guess, more broadcast side was kind of by mistake. I signed up to take journalism every year of high school, and there was a year where I put the TV news class as an alternate elective, thinking, I'll get my regular electives. I won't have to worry about it. But it just so happened one of my electives didn't work out, so they put me in the TV class, and I was mad that I didn't choose to do that earlier. I got to do that for 3 semesters, and I did that along with, still doing the journalism classes. And I thought, this is something that I actually enjoy doing. Maybe I won't be on TV one day, or maybe I won't write for some big paper one day, but this is in the wheelhouse of what I want to do.
Now, talk a little bit about, so you get to Waynesburg in 2014. Let's talk a little bit about, so you get to campus. What's the experience like so we've had a couple other communications majors from Waynesburg on the show. What is when you guys get there as freshmen, it's not like Syracuse, Northwestern, the big schools where you probably got you got 3 years before you're going to be touching a camera or doing anything. What's it like at Waynesburg when you first get there?
It gets you a chance to be pretty hands-on right away. The school aspect, oddly enough, I really enjoyed. I did get there a little bit ahead of time because I was on the football team my freshman year. But once we got into school, I oddly enjoyed it just because the comm classes that I was in, I was like, okay, like I feel pretty good about the decision I made. There were guys in there that I was able to make friends with pretty quickly. It kind of becomes a family up there because you're with all the same guys so often.
Mhm.
So we kind of made our own little crew, and any sort of outside elective that we had to take, we would attack those together. But it gives you a chance to do things right away. You have meetings that whole first week of classes, like the syllabus week,
Mhm.
uh, and it's for every sort of like club or activity you can get involved with. So like the newspaper has its own night, the campus TV station has its own night, the radio station, so on and so forth. And those three were the ones I was definitely interested in. I got involved in all three of them as quickly as possible. And uh, radio, I would say, definitely caught me the most. I became a fan of that the most because I think it allowed you for a little bit more freedom on air.
Mhm.
And on the TV side, I pretty much did stuff behind the scenes for the first year and a half, almost first 2 full years. I wrote a little bit for the Yellow Jacket, the school paper, but radio and TV is what caught me the rest of the way.
Now, as I said before, we've had former Waynesburg guys on. They're a little younger than you are, but what was your experience like with Lanny? Because Ed told us a couple weeks ago how sometimes you were good, and sometimes Lanny would, as soon as he hit pause, you knew that, like, oh yeah, I heard it, I got it, I'm here. So what was your experience like?
So I would say it's pretty similar. My big piece of advice for really anyone that came through after my class was that you have to have thick skin to go through this industry. And I think Lanny displayed a really good precedent for that, because that was just a sign of things to come. Because if you end up getting to a point where you're a prominent play-by-play announcer or somebody on TV or somebody on the radio or somebody in the newspaper, you're going to get backlash all the time from people. I mean, the haters and the trolls are out there everywhere. So I always thought that was a pretty good lesson that he portrayed, and I don't even think he really did it on purpose. But going through meetings with him were definitely intimidating. Every time I went through that, I always had in the back of my mind, if I can come out of this with anything positive, I'll be happy, because I know he's pretty much just going to rip me to shreds. But like anything, like a sport, like anything you're passionate in and you get coached in, I always thought if he like rips into me, if he gets mad at me, whatever, if he doesn't think I did a good job, I always just thought that shows that he cares.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing, another way that sort of finds out who can make it through, so to speak, is some guys go through the first meeting or two and they think, I can't handle this. This isn't for me. Lanny yelled at me. He got under my skin. He made me mad. And they're out. I mean, I think whenever I went into Waynesburg, there were, I think, 12 to 14 of us that were sports broadcasting majors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 5 of us graduated as sports broadcasting majors. So he, not that he bullied or intimidated anybody out of it, but he had people have second thoughts, just going through his meetings and realizing, okay, maybe this isn't for me, maybe behind the scenes is for me, or maybe journalism's for me, or maybe something not even in communications is for me. But no, I mean, I owe a lot of, what I've gone on to do to Lanny, because he, beyond everything else, he gives you such a strong mindset, and the will to have thick skin to get through, because again, people are going to come at you from all directions, and you just got to be able to handle it. It's like playing a sport.
Well, and I think for you, especially being a part of the PM team, I'm sure you deal with more people that have. I know Pony gets it from all ends. So like, I watch him on Twitter and I'm like, man, I don't know if I could handle the people that just like, I feel like he trolls a little bit. Is that true? Is some of his tweets and whatnot, or is he trying to get people like, oh, this is the most, I'm going to watch how people react.
He definitely does. And I think Chris Muller describes it in a very good way. He says, Pony's the guy that lights the match, throws it into a pile of wood, watches everything burn, and just walks away while everybody else is still standing around it. I think that's a perfect way to describe how he is on social media. And I actually think I have so much respect for how both of them handle social media, because you see your people out there that cannot resist any of the trolls or haters or people that come at them. And I think it is a very good display of discipline on Pony and Chris's part to really not partake in any of that. So that is something I've tried to do as well. If I'd see somebody respond to me with a nasty comment after a take, I just let it sit there. I mean, don't even give them the time of day.
Well, so I as I was looking through your, I did a little creeping down the LinkedIn resume, and we got Trib Total Media. I saw WJPA. I saw very close to where I am here, the West Virginia Black Bears. How do you, for the people that are now younger and now are coming through, how do you set up and handle let's say you don't get the internship you want? How do you react when you don't do that? Or is there a way that is there any advice you have for people that are trying to get into an internship to be involved in the communications and specifically in the sports aspect of broadcasting?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been one to, I know people always say be persistent with somebody if you're trying to get a hold of them. And I've always been on the walking the tightrope with something like that, because it is good to do. But I always have felt personally like, oh man, I'm probably bothering them. And like, now they're definitely not going to get back to me. But you do want to have a little bit of that. But also, just keep kind of scrapping away, keep doing your thing, keep working hard, keep grinding. And I always tried to stay positive about things. I mean, I applied to a bunch of internships or jobs, at both different times. And, you're going to get those rejections, or you're just going to flat out not get an answer, which I know is also discouraging. But I just always tried to stay positive about things, think that, eventually something's going to break my way. And I also think if you get your foot in the door with anybody, make sure you build some positive relationships out of that, because that could also create a first job for you. I mean, I know it pretty much goes for any field out there, but wherever you get your internship with, if you carry yourself well, set a good example of yourself, build a good relationship with your boss or whoever's in charge there, you're more than likely going to come out of it with at least one opportunity, whether that be another internship or your first real job.
So last thing about Waynesburg, and then we're going to move into some of those other things that you've done. What would you say what stands out to you? What's the broadcast? What's the maybe it was a class, maybe it wasn't even a broadcast, but what's the thing that stands out to you for communications at Waynesburg? Other than I mean, we know from the past guests we've had, you guys are one hell of a close family, but what is that one for you that when you think of Waynesburg, it's like, I remember that?
So I mean, I would just go in a little bit generalized here, not the family thing, since that's already been answered. I mean, that's definitely part of it. It is a very close-knit group. But anytime that we had a home event, we had a whole TV production for it.
Mhm.
So I mean, now that was with the two big sports down there, so football and basketball. But just all of the teamwork and hard work and so on and so forth that went into that. While we were also really just having fun with your buddies.
Mhm.
That's pretty much what came of all of that. You know, I remember so many early Saturday mornings, whether it be at the football stadium or down at the gym, getting ready for, you know, a homecoming football game or senior day and men's and women's basketball. And for all the hard work that went into it from everybody involved, whether you're the the play-by-play and color guy, whether you're the pregame and post-game guy, whether you're the producer, director, or audio guy in the truck, even if you're the guy that runs stats out to the broadcast crews, like everybody came together for
Mhm.
that time and did their job. You know, there were a lot of broadcasts that we came away with as a team that we felt really good about. And it was just because whether or not you're best friends with everybody there, it was like everybody wanted to do a good job and, you know, not necessarily outdo that person next to them, but they just, you know, everybody wanted to be on their A game, you know, every, you know, Wednesday night or Saturday afternoon.
So leading into being on your A game, as I mentioned, there's some, and I only highlighted a couple because you have a very long list of what you've been a part of. Um, Firstly, I want to talk to you about the experience with Trib. What was that like? We'll start there.
I've worked with the Trib Live High School Sports Network for a few years. Now with my position with the Fan, you know, that'll become a little bit more difficult because Friday nights are going to be kind of hard to pull off doing football. But that was something that happened for me about midway through college.
Mhm.
Every time a class hits their junior year, Lanny will call a few guys into his office, and I guess they're sort of the guys that he sees as, you know, the upper echelon of the department at that point in terms of like the play by play or color or whatever.
Mhm.
And he recommends a few of them if they're interested to Don Rebel and all the guys with the high school sports network. So my junior year, I started to do that. You know, just covering games on Friday nights. Again, whether I was play by play or the analyst, it it didn't really matter to me. I just thought it was a really cool opportunity in college to get to do. And, you know, I got to meet a handful of guys that were already with the network, who were with the network for a while before me. And also the occasional time where you get paired with one of your buddies that's also there. So, you know, I did that up until uh, this past season. And,
Mhm.
you know, until the full time opportunity with the Fan came along, you know, I had fully continued to plan and do that. There may be the occasional, I don't know, Saturday game or Saturday basketball game once we get to that season that I could maybe pull off too.
So, and not only were you doing the high school sports, but you were also very involved in the conference because you worked with the broadcast for the PAC, correct?
Yeah, yeah, I did that along with another Waynesburg grad runs that, Randy Gore, who graduated in I think 2001. Um he broadcasted Wild Things baseball for a while. And then he started up the PAC Sports Network with a few guys, maybe almost 10 years ago now. I think they actually just had their 10th year this past year. But that was something else about midway through college. I got to know Randy, and we've actually worked St. Vincent football together as well the last 5 years or so. And you know, I've done a handful of games for him there, and you know, that was again like just another way to sharpen your skills, sort of. And even though that's not what I do right now, you know, I'm not doing play by play currently. It's still something I would plan on doing on the side down the road. I still talk to Randy all the time. I've told him, maybe once we get to basketball season, like I'll do some games here and there, because I just thoroughly enjoy it too. Like
Yeah.
a random Saturday, going somewhere, whether it be Waynesburg or Grove City or Geneva or Westminster. I just enjoy covering those sports. I really enjoy calling basketball, and it's a fun operation.
Would you say that do you enjoy covering basketball more than football?
So football is definitely my favorite sport. There's no doubt. I think basketball is easier to cover, especially in terms of play-by-play, just because even though it's a fast-moving game, there's only 5 guys on the court at a given time, and football. I think identifying the tackler in football is one of the harder things to do, in broadcasting. Unless it's something that's blatantly out in the wide open, like a sack or tackle for loss. It's pretty hard to find out every little detail that goes into a single play of football. So, I mean, I really enjoy doing football. I normally do color along with Randy. He does play-by-play for St. Vincent. But basketball, I really enjoy because the pace and, it doesn't get too confusing for me out there, even though I'm not an expert of the game necessarily.
So you came from, you're in Waynesburg, you drive up I-70, or I-79, connect I-70, you're in Washington, you end up at WJPA for a little bit. What was that experience like?
So I did that for a relatively short time. I think that was like 6 months to a year. That was around the time where I was still doing West Virginia Black Bears. I may have just finished up a season with them, and I was kind of looking for some things to fill in the holes work wise. So, I would cover random events for them, or a couple of Saturdays here and there, I would do the news, which that's a pretty impressive operation for such a small radio station. I was blown away by how much went into that. A Saturday shift to do the news, that's a true 9 to 10 hour day right there. And even though you're done by about 1 p.m., you're in there at 2:30 or 3 in the morning, because it's pretty much a one-man show, and it's a lot more pieces that go into it than I think people realize. I mean, you got to do some things for the website, from what I remember. Of course, find X amount of stories that can cover a 10-minute newscast. It doesn't sound like a long time to the average person, but you got to think how many news stories you can read in a 10-minute span. I mean, if you didn't have, honestly, 15 to 20 ready to go, then you probably weren't going to meet your times. And, with radio and of course TV too, you have to hit things at the right time, especially if you're working in news. Sports, right now I don't have to worry about time so much, but especially in news, you have to hit your times pretty much down to the second.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Black Bears. How does that come about? Because that's not a sport we've talked about with you. We've talked about the 2 major ones. How do you end up coming down and covering some baseball?
So that was a connection I had through my internship. So the place I interned my sophomore and junior year of college, that was a small radio operation as well. That was out in Latrobe. And of course, being from Greensburg, it was easy enough for me to do that every day. And again, it goes back to kind of building the connection with your boss or your superior, wherever you're at. He noticed the work I put in and day out for being an unpaid intern, especially. I pretty much did anything the guy would ask me to do, and he ended up coming through with 3 opportunities for me by the time that summer, and then into the school year a little bit as well. He asked me if I was interested in doing the St. Vincent football broadcasts. So my senior year at Waynesburg, I was actually covering St. Vincent football. That was my first year doing that. And then as we got into my senior year, I get a phone call from him at one point, and he's telling me how he has acquired 2 radio stations in West Virginia, and one of them covers pretty much all of Morgantown. The other one's more of like Fairmont and Bridgeport and areas like that. And he he knew that I had baseball experience from Lanny's teachings in Waynesburg and everything. And he said, well, one of the stations we got, they're going to carry Black Bears baseball. And if that's something that would interest you, we would team you up again with Randy, and, you guys would do the games if you want to. And I was all over that because baseball was one that I grew to really enjoy calling in college. And once I started doing that, I was, it was, I was almost in like broadcast heaven early on doing that, just because it was so cool for me right out of school to be in quote unquote professional baseball.
Yeah.
And you're seeing guys that just got drafted, especially in the Black Bears case, they just got drafted by the Pirates. So I did that for 2 years. The first year had, guys like Travis Swaggerty on the team, who he's had a cup of coffee at this point with the Buccos. And you get to see guys that go on rehab assignments sometimes. JT Brubaker made a handful of starts both years that I did games. Key Brian Hayes played in 2 or 3 series the second year, and I got to get the stories of a lot of these guys. And, it's really cool now, even though I don't cover them anymore. Anytime I see these guys come up, whether it be for the Pirates or whether it be some other player I saw that comes up with another organization, I think, it's, pretty cool. I got to see that guy in his first steps of professional baseball, or whether it be for a short time or not.
Now, from the Black Bears and WJPA and the Trib and the PAC and calling games, how do you package all of that and find your way to 93.7 The Fan?
So some things went pretty south for me, actually, in 2019. So after that second year with the Black Bears, I had also, with that same radio station down in West Virginia, I did, like, I was sort of like a morning update guy. They had a lot of just canned automated programming, but I did like sports, weather, and traffic updates for them. And, they would just kind of get inserted the old radio way, and they would just play, every 20 minutes or so on the stations. And again, something where early on in radio, not getting paid well at all, but I'm getting up at 3 a.m. and going to the station and working until 11 or noon and doing this. Really enjoyed doing it. And then just financial reasons with the company pretty much put that away. So I found out right around the end of the Black Bear season that I pretty much wouldn't have my position doing the update stuff anymore. And maybe a week or 2 after the Black Bears season wrapped up, I found out that the contract, which I think only had 1 year left, which was wiped away by COVID anyway, the contract with the Black Bears and the radio station was ending a year short.
Okay.
So I was pretty much out on both of those, and just kind of doing whatever, to make things work, because, I'm out on my own. I've been out on my own since I graduated college, and that's whenever I started doing some stuff with JPA. And I had some connections with not necessarily the Fan, but KDKA AM, another professor from college, Melinda Roeder. She does news for the AM side, and I had her whenever she was an adjunct professor at Waynesburg. So I reached out to her just asking if she knew of anything really open there. And she got back to me and said, actually, I think the fan might be looking for some part-time people. Let me get you in contact with some people here. And she was able to do that. And I had some connections through them because there was a very, very brief time when I was on the AM side in college, but that was just for the last few months of college.
Okay.
Pretty much from January to April, I was producing on 1020 AM. But then
Mhm.
once I got the job in West Virginia, I went down there, and now that everything went south there, I'm coming back. So I'm lucky that they were happy with the work that I had done, thinking, yeah, I mean, we could always use an extra hand. So I started part time then at the Fan in December of 2019.
Mhm.
A few months later, obviously, everything in the world pretty much goes kaput. And I'm just working, whenever, weekends, sometimes the 5 to 11 shift, sometimes the late shift after a
Mhm.
Pirate game, because they used to have like the real late show that Paul Zeiss would host. Um, and while I did that, I worked with Amazon, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody. By the way, apologies to any Amazon big wigs that might be listening, or Jeff Bezos. But I worked both in the warehouse, and I also started to drive for Amazon. And again, just anything to kind of make it work.
Mhm.
All while I'm rolling part time at the Fan. And then, it wasn't until about a year ago that uh, things started to roll a little bit more in my direction.
Now, how does the role start to head, and how do you end up now being Donny football?
So it was about this time a year ago. We were in early August, and Craig Riley, who is now my boss, conveniently enough, he was the PM team producer this time last year. And again, with COVID, everybody had to play it safe anytime somebody got sick. And, Craig has 3 little kids, and there was a week where, I had talked to Craig a lot doing uh, Pirates pre and post game with him because he used to host that whenever he was also their producer. So I worked a lot with him hand in hand, and I had a lot of conversations with him about, if I stopped working at Amazon and maybe found something else more with like morning hours, do you think opening myself up for opportunities here would pay off? And, he was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can make it work, I mean, I'm not going to try to tell you how to do things financially, but with Amazon, I was working pretty much from like 10:30 in the morning until 7:30 or 8 at night. I mean, it didn't really have an end time. It was like whenever you were done with your route
Yeah.
and all the packages were delivered, then you go on with your day. So, I had all those conversations with him, and I'm like, honestly, I got to go for it, at some point. So I found like a part-time job at a CVS. It was
Mhm.
just, mornings into the early afternoon, like 8 to 2 every day or something like that. Just so I would be more open for things at the Fan. And it just so happened that in the small gap, it was like a 2 or 3 week gap where I was done at Amazon and I was going to start at CVS. Craig called me and said one of his kids was sick. I had to get COVID tested, and he asked me if I wanted to produce for the guys that day. And I was pretty nervous. I almost said no, just because I was like, oh man, like I've never done their show. It's the biggest show. I don't want to mess it up. And he kind of encouraged me, like, oh no, you'll be great. Like, don't worry about it. If you have any questions, let me know. We'll get you through it. And I'm very glad I went on and went through it because uh early on with them, I could just tell that things clicked, and I think they realized that too. And after that week, Craig called me. He had some very nice things to say about how he thought the week went. He listened to the show every day while he was off, and
Mhm.
the things that the guys said. And I kind of just had in the back of my mind, like, man, I hope Craig gets some sort of promotion so that I could I could step into his role. And we get a couple of more months down the line. It hits maybe October or so, and he becomes the brand manager of 93.7 The Fan. So once that happened, his seat was open. And I was like, all right, things are actually working out the perfect way.
Mhm.
I feel good about this. I try not to get overconfident, but I just thought, like, this is your big chance, kid. Like, don't screw it up. And Craig had me fill in a ton for him, like, while he was kind of transitioning. And then, I still went through the interview process and everything. I know they interviewed a handful of guys too, because, Andrew and Chris are a blast to work with. So a lot of different guys wanted that position. But, they still felt really good about it. And, it was in December, whenever it got into crunch time. He hired me like middle of December,
Mhm.
and it's been a blast ever since. I think my first official day was December 21st of 2021.
That's a hell of a Christmas gift for 2021, huh?
Yeah, it was really nice to get that. I mean, after the stuff I had gone through the 2 years prior, everything with West Virginia falling through,
Mhm.
and thinking like, man, like I'm gonna fall flat on my face here, but like I was just like scraping by, grinding away. Um, and then obviously everything with COVID wasn't easy on anybody. But again, instead of sitting at home like a lot of Americans did, like I was like, well, this sucks, but I'm working at Amazon and I'm trying to balance both. And there's one job every day I'm dreading going to, but the other one is on the other side of that fence, and I got to do that still part time. And I got lucky, I could say, and I was in the right place at the right time, and I took advantage of my opportunity. But at the same time, like I had to go through a lot of stuff the last few years before I hit that spot, so that's what made it even more satisfying for me in the end.
Now, is there a favorite moment thus far this first year of being Donny football with the PM
Ooh.
team? Is there a moment that with those two, or is it individually? Do they each have their own kind of in your head?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly hard to pick just one moment. I mean,
Okay.
there have been a lot of fun times with those guys. I mean, it truly is a job where I wake up every day and I'm looking forward to go to it. And it's something that my dad brought up when I was a kid, because he, forever he was working jobs that he hated, but
Mhm.
it put food on the table. It supported us, this and that, and he always preached to me that I wanted to do something that I loved to do, something that I would have fun doing. I would look forward to it in the morning. I'd wake up happy. I'd go to bed happy, and this was it. Obviously it's far from the end of my journey. I'm only 26 years old, but uh, it's certainly one that I can wake up to and be happy about every day. Because it's a real blast with those guys.
So, since you are Donny football, and there was some pretty big news that got announced out there in Latrobe today, how do you feel about Deontay Johnson and the Steelers coming to an agreement on the 2-year extension?
I love the move, especially for the price. I mean, I think Johnson's a really good player. Certainly not in that top tier of receiver. Probably not in the top 10, maybe not even in the top 20.
Mhm.
But I thought for a while, once I saw the money that a lot of guys were getting, I was thinking, man, no way he's going to say yes for under 20 million a year. And if they could pull it off, then I'd be happy. And, to pull it off for what, like 18.5 million a year or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's good on both ends, really. It didn't lock him down too long, but still 3 more years. So I think everybody can be pretty happy about it.
Well, and it opens him up he gets to go back into free agency a couple years down the road. He's still going to be in his prime. I think it's a best fit for both teams. He's had the drop problems. They've had, Ben being on the way out and the arm injury and Mason Rudolph and the changes and everything. With all that being said, and Ben Roethlisberger not being the quarterback anymore and the battle that's going on out there, what are any inside you want to give us prediction wise? How you feeling about the Steelers this year?
I think there'll be it'll be a typical Mike Tomlin year. I mean, they're going to battle every single game. Every single one might be a fight though, more than ever, whether they're playing a team that's 10-0 and the top team in the conference, or playing a team that's 0-10 and the worst team in the league. I see them right around 500 again. I think they'll finish 9-8.
Okay.
If I had to guess right now. I'll be honest. I don't know when we'll see Kenny Pickett, but I do think we'll see him at some point this year.
Okay. So now on that, since we went down the quarterback rabbit hole, does Mason, in your opinion, does Mason stay on this roster, or does he end up maybe getting moved to another team for draft picks or what have you?
So I think what they're secretly hoping for, now this is all just my theory, I think as things play out around the league in the preseason, if somebody loses their backup quarterback and they're in pretty dire straits when it comes to the guys behind the starter at that point, I would be on the phone the moment it happens if I'm the Steelers, if I'm Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin, because if you're able to get Rudolph to another team for pretty much anything, I think that's a win. I mean, they got Josh Dobbs for a 5th round pick a few years back. I mean, that and looking at that, it seems like a miracle that they pulled that off. But Mason Rudolph is more accomplished than Dobbs has ever been in the league. So if they can get anything, I think that's a win, because it's hard to have somebody that has starting experience on your roster and still a 3rd string quarterback. I think at that point you kind of just got to cut them loose.
Yeah, it's hard to justify it. So at the beginning of the show, we introduced you as the producer, football guy. We've covered producer. We've covered football guy, wing expert. I need the story. What is the expertise in the chicken wing?
So my wing love has been around for a while. I mean, I've loved chicken wings since I was a little kid. I've gone back and forth on what my favorite food is. I know that the guys brought up on the show one day because somebody oddly wrote them a letter. I still don't know who it is. It's kind of creepy. Somebody wrote them a letter from Greensburg. They had the cutout of my profile from our senior football program, and it said in there that my favorite food was ribs. So the guys gave me a hard time about that I put ribs instead of chicken wings. Ribs are certainly up there for me. My dad's actually making them this weekend, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I mean, the wing love has been there for as long as I can remember. And the notorious wing moment for me, coming with Channel 4, that was back in late January, early February, right around Super Bowl time. I have a friend that works with WTAE. He's a photog for them. And, I know some people called it out like, oh, this had to be a complete setup. It wasn't a complete setup. I mean, I'll say that, because it's not like I was out there seeking him out, like, hey man, like get me on TV or anything like that. But he reached out to a few of us from college and said, hey guys, we're doing this story on like rising beer prices, rising wing prices. and everything leading up to the Super Bowl. I know it's a Friday night, but if any of you guys happen to be free, let me know. And we can make something happen. And just me wanting to help out a buddy, thinking like, oh, I don't want to leave my guy hanging. Like, honestly, man, I'm not doing anything, even though it's a Friday night. And he was like, all right, meet me in the Giant Eagle parking lot in the South Side at like 9 p.m. or 9:30 or something. I'm like, all right. And so, like, to that point, people could say it was a setup, but I didn't script out anything I was going to say. He brought up, what are your thoughts on the rising wing prices? And I went on about how it was devastating. And I used the word devastating twice in the same sentence. That was just all off the top of my head. If I could have scripted it out, it probably would have been something more creative, but no, it was just all, that part was genuine, all off the top of my head. And I stand by it. I mean, I try to get, it's definitely not good for my health, but I normally get wings once probably every week to 10 days.
So you are the resident in the fan. You are the resident wing expert. Then we have covered that. We explained it. Everybody at home, if you didn't know, that's how the wing expert title was dubbed to Donny Football here. We have come to that point. I want to thank you for taking time on your vacation this week, away from everything, to sit down with us and have a conversation about you. If you guys are just joining us, please go back to the beginning. I don't know why you would join us at the end. Go back to the beginning, watch it from there, and get to here. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and iHeartRadio. The only place you have to change what you type in, other than typing in Dingo Talk, when you go on Instagram, you have to put an underscore in between Dingo and Talk, because if you type Dingo Talk in, it's going to show you some wild dogs. And I'm not that. So that's not me. You're going to look for this logo behind me. That's what you're looking for. But Don Chedrick, thank you very much for taking the time, and good luck the rest of the year, I guess.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. You too.
And we are here every Thursday, Chuckleheads. So make sure you tune in, hit the subscribe button, follow us everywhere, and we'll see you next week, Chuckleheads.